In the quiet town of Maplewood, a shocking crime shattered the peace one summer evening. It was a night like any other, with families enjoying dinner and children playing outside. But just after sunset, a terrible event unfolded that would change lives forever. Thomas, a beloved twin brother and friend, was found dead in a dark alley, leaving the community in disbelief. He was only 28 years old, with dreams for the future and a close bond with his twin brother Marcus. The news spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the neighborhood. Who could have done such a thing? As detectives started their investigation, they uncovered a tangled web of jealousy, anger, and betrayal that led to this tragedy. Thomas had recently begun dating Zara, a vibrant woman full of life, but as their relationship blossomed, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Marcus and Zara had their own complicated feelings, creating a mix of love and rivalry that would soon explode. It became clear that not everything was as it seemed in this seemingly perfect world. With each twist in the investigation, the truth started to emerge. Friends and family were questioned, and secrets came to light. What began as a simple love story turned into a tale of rage, leading to a deadly confrontation. As the police searched for answers, Officer James stepped in, determined to bring justice to the grieving family. He faced many challenges, but he was driven by a strong sense of duty and the desire to find out who was responsible for this heinous act. In this story, we will follow the path from a night of fun to a moment of tragedy, exploring the hearts and minds of those involved. We will piece together the events leading up to Thomas's murder, revealing the motivations that led to such a shocking crime. As we uncover the details, we will understand how one moment of anger can lead to a lifetime of heartbreak. Join us as we delve into this gripping true crime story that reminds us how fragile life can be and how choices can change everything. The night was warm and clear in Maplewood, a small town where everyone knew each other. I had just finished dinner with my twin brother Marcus and his girlfriend Zara. We were all close, sharing laughs and stories about our day. I felt happy and content. But as the night went on, something changed. Zara's mood shifted, and I could sense tension building in the air. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a minor disagreement between them. But little did I know that the night would take a dark turn. After dinner, we decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. It was our usual thing to do after a meal, and it helped us digest. The streets were quiet, lit by the soft glow of street lights. As we walked, I noticed Zara was acting distant, not engaging in our conversations like she usually did. I glanced at Marcus, hoping he would notice too, but he seemed oblivious to her change in behavior. As we strolled past the park, I saw couples sitting on benches, children playing on swings, and families enjoying their evening. Everything seemed so peaceful, but I felt an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. I couldn't shake the thought that something was off with Zara. I thought about how much I liked her and how much she meant to Marcus. I wished she would lighten up and join in on the fun. Eventually, we made our way back to Marcus's house. As we entered, the tension that had been building in Zara was now palpable. I suggested we watch a movie to distract ourselves, but Zara refused and said she needed to talk to Marcus privately. I felt a pang of discomfort in my chest. I knew these conversations could sometimes lead to trouble. I tried to give them space, retreating to the living room. From where I sat, I could hear their voices but not the words. At first, it seemed like a normal conversation. Then I noticed their tones rising. It sounded serious. I could tell that Zara was upset, and Marcus was trying to calm her down. I wanted to intervene, but I also knew that sometimes people needed to sort out their problems alone. Minutes passed, and it felt like an eternity. I started to think maybe I should check on them. Just then, Zara stormed out of the room, her eyes blazing with anger. I stood up, ready to say something, but she shoved past me and out the front door. Marcus looked stunned, his face pale. He followed her outside, calling her name. I felt trapped in a moment I couldn't control. I walked out onto the porch, unsure of what to do. The night air was cool, a sharp contrast to the heat of the argument I had just witnessed. I could see them standing in the driveway, their figures illuminated by the dim porch light. I heard Zara shout something that I couldn't make out, and Marcus responded with frustration. Then it happened. Zara pushed Marcus, and he stumbled back. I gasped, feeling a rush of adrenaline. I wanted to step in and stop it, but I hesitated. It was hard to believe that this was happening. Zara had always seemed so nice, and I couldn't understand why she was acting this way. Before I could process what was going on, I noticed a glint in Zara's hand. My heart sank as I realized she was holding a knife. My mind raced. I shouted for them to stop, but my voice felt small against the chaos. In that moment, everything slowed down. I saw the anger in Zara's eyes and the confusion on Marcus's face. The next few seconds felt like an eternity. Zara lunged forward, and I watched in horror as the knife connected. Marcus cried out, his expression shifting from shock to pain in an instant. Time froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I ran toward them, my feet heavy, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached them, I saw Marcus on the ground, clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. Zara stood frozen, her face pale, realizing what she had done. It was a scene one could never have imagined. The love I saw in their relationship just moments ago had turned into this horrifying act of violence. I knelt beside Marcus, trying to keep him conscious. I called out for help, my voice breaking with fear. I told him to stay with me, to hold on. But deep down, I knew that this was serious. The sight of his blood made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, to cry, but I held it together, focusing on him. Zara was still standing there, her eyes wide and unblinking. She was in shock, unable to move or speak. I felt a mix of anger and confusion towards her. How could she let this happen? I wanted to shake her out of her trance, to make her see the reality of what she had just done. As I waited for help to arrive, I heard the distant sound of sirens approaching. The wail grew louder, and my heart sank further. I couldn't believe this was happening to us, to our family. I felt so helpless as I watched my brother fighting for his life, the person I cared about more than anything else. The ambulance arrived, and paramedics rushed to us. They pushed me aside gently but firmly, focusing on Marcus. I felt tears streaming down my face as I watched them work. I could see the urgency in their movements, and I prayed that it wasn't too late. Zara was still there, frozen in place, her face void of any expression. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she had ruined everything. But there was no point. All I could do was watch as they lifted Marcus onto a stretcher and rushed him to the ambulance. As they loaded him into the vehicle, I caught Zara's eye for a brief moment. Her expression was empty, and I realized she didn't even recognize the gravity of her actions. She had crossed a line that could never be undone, and now our lives would never be the same. The doors of the ambulance shut, and they drove away, taking Marcus with them. I was left standing there, staring at the spot where everything had changed. The once warm night now felt cold and empty, filled with the weight of what had just happened. My heart raced as I tried to comprehend the chaos that had just unfolded. The laughter, the friendship, the love, all of it was shattered in an instant, and there was no going back. This was only the beginning of a dark journey that would lead to answers, pain, and the search for justice. The events of that night would haunt us forever, shaping our lives in ways we could never have imagined. The days after the incident felt surreal. I had never experienced anything so terrible in my life. I kept replaying the events in my mind, struggling to comprehend how everything had changed so quickly. The night was still fresh in my memory, and I could not shake the image of Marcus lying on the ground, blood pooling around him. I learned that he had been rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save him. But news traveled fast in Maplewood, and soon everyone knew about the tragedy. Neighbors whispered, friends reached out, and the community was shaken. The police began their investigation, trying to piece together what happened that fateful night. I felt helpless, unable to help my brother in any way. Marcus's condition was critical, and the doctors warned us that he might not survive. My family gathered at the hospital, anxiety hanging heavy in the air. I could see the worry etched on my mother's face as she paced the waiting room, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. My father stood by her side, trying to console her while clearly battling his own fears. As we waited for news, I thought about Zara. She was the one who had caused all this pain. I remembered the nights we spent laughing and enjoying each other's company. Now she was the person responsible for turning our lives upside down. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. How could someone who had been so kind become capable of such a violent act? Eventually, a doctor came to speak with us. He looked serious, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. He told us that Marcus had undergone surgery and that he was stable but still in critical condition. It was a small comfort, but I knew the road to recovery would be long. I wanted to see him, to talk to him, to let him know I was there for him. But I had to wait. Days turned into nights, and the hospital became our second home. I spent hours sitting by Marcus's bedside, holding his hand, hoping he could feel my presence. I talked to him about our childhood memories, about our dreams for the future, and about how I wished he would wake up and tell me everything would be okay. The beeping of the machines was a constant reminder of his fragility, and I prayed for the sound to change, for him to wake up and return to the brother I knew. Meanwhile, the police had taken Zara into custody. I learned that she was being charged with attempted murder. It felt strange to think about her being locked away. I remembered the moments we shared and how she had been a part of our family. Now she was just another name in the police reports, another face in the mugshots plastered across social media. As the investigation unfolded, details began to emerge about that night. Witnesses reported hearing shouting before the incident, and police found the knife used in the attack. It was a kitchen knife from Marcus's own home, adding another layer of tragedy to the situation. The police interviewed our friends and family, trying to gather as much information as possible. I knew they were doing their job, but it felt invasive. The media caught wind of the story and quickly turned it into a sensational headline. Reports of the love triangle gone wrong spread like wildfire. Articles detailed the events of that night, portraying Zara as a villain and painting Marcus as a victim. It was hard to read, knowing that our lives had become fodder for the news. I wanted to scream at the reporters, to tell them that we were real people, not just characters in a story. As the days passed, I noticed a shift in my family. My parents were exhausted, both physically and emotionally. They had been trying to hold it together for Marcus, but I could see the strain on their faces. My mother often broke down in tears, while my father tried to remain strong, putting on a brave face for all of us. I wanted to be strong for them, but I felt like I was falling apart inside. During this time, I received several calls from friends and family, all offering their support. Some brought food, while others sent flowers. They told me they were thinking of Marcus and praying for his recovery. It felt comforting to know that so many people cared, but it also reminded me of the empty space that had been created by the violence of that night. One afternoon, as I sat in Marcus's hospital room, I noticed a commotion outside. A group of police officers arrived, and I recognized Officer James, the lead investigator on the case. He walked into the room, his expression serious yet compassionate. He introduced himself and asked if I had time to talk. I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Officer James began to explain the situation. He told me that Zara had given her statement, but there were still many unanswered questions. He wanted to know if Marcus had mentioned anything about their relationship, or if he had shown any signs of distress leading up to the incident. I thought hard but found it difficult to recall any specific details. Marcus had seemed happy, at least on the surface. I mentioned how they had fought that night, but I couldn't pinpoint the reason behind it. Officer James listened attentively, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. I could see he was determined to find the truth, and I felt a sense of relief, knowing that someone was taking this seriously. As our conversation ended, Officer James promised to keep me updated on the case. He told me he would be in touch as more information came to light. I appreciated his kindness and professionalism, but I still felt a heavy burden on my shoulders. I wanted to protect my brother and find justice for what had happened to him. The days turned into weeks, and Marcus remained unconscious. I held on to hope, believing that he would wake up and everything would return to normal. But with each passing day, the reality of our situation sank deeper. The world outside continued to spin while ours felt stuck in a nightmare. I watched as other families came and went, celebrating their loved ones' recoveries while I clung to the possibility of Marcus's return. The police continued their investigation, and the court dates were set. Zara would face trial, and I knew I would have to face her in court. The thought made me uneasy, but I understood that justice had to be served. I wanted to know why this had happened, why someone I once cared for had become a stranger capable of such violence. As I reflected on these events, I realized that I was not just fighting for Marcus's recovery but also for our family's healing. We had been shattered, but I hoped that one day we could pick up the pieces and move forward, no matter how difficult the road ahead would be. For now, I remained vigilant, watching over my brother, waiting for the moment when he would finally open his eyes and tell me everything would be all right. Officer James asked me to come in for a more detailed interview. I was nervous but understood the importance of cooperating. The police needed to know everything I could tell them about Marcus and Zara's relationship. I shared everything I remembered, trying to provide as much detail as I could. I spoke about their relationship, the ups and downs, and how things had seemed to change leading up to the night of the attack. Officer James listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions. He wanted to understand the dynamics of their relationship, to see if there were any warning signs we had missed. I described how Marcus had always tried to be supportive, how he cared for Zara deeply. It pained me to think that someone we trusted had turned against him. As I continued to recount events, I began to feel a sense of weight lifting. I was sharing the burden of our tragedy, and it helped. I wanted to believe that speaking out would help bring justice to Marcus. I wanted to make sure that what had happened to him would not be in vain. Zara's trial date was set, and the reality of facing her loomed over me. I knew I would have to confront her in court, and the thought terrified me. I wanted to yell at her, to make her understand the pain she had caused. But I also felt a strange sense of pity for her. She was once a part of our lives, and now she was the source of our suffering. The day of the trial finally arrived. I dressed carefully, wanting to present myself well, but also feeling the weight of anxiety. My parents joined me, and we drove to the courthouse together. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with anticipation and fear. When we arrived, the courthouse was bustling with people. News reporters gathered outside, eager to catch a glimpse of Zara. I could see the flashes of cameras and hear the murmurs of the crowd. It felt surreal, as if we were living in a story that belonged to someone else. Inside the courtroom, I took a seat near the front. I wanted to be close enough to see everything. The room was filled with people, including friends and family of both Marcus and Zara. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. As the proceedings began, the judge entered the room, and everyone stood in respect. I sat back down, my heart racing. The lawyers presented their cases, and I listened intently as the details of that night were laid out for everyone to hear. Witnesses were called to the stand, recounting their versions of events. Each testimony added pieces to the puzzle, but it also brought up painful memories. I struggled to remain composed as I heard others describe the fear and confusion surrounding Marcus's attack. When it was finally time for Zara to take the stand, I held my breath. She looked different from the person I had once known. There was a hardness in her eyes that I had never seen before. As she spoke, I listened carefully, trying to understand her side of the story. Zara described the events leading up to the attack, painting herself as the victim of circumstances beyond her control. She spoke of her feelings of betrayal and anger, and while I could see she was hurt, it did not excuse what she had done. I felt a surge of anger bubbling inside me as she shifted the blame onto others. The courtroom atmosphere was tense as the prosecution pressed her for answers. They highlighted the evidence against her, the knife, and the statements of witnesses who had seen everything unfold. I hoped the jury would see the truth, that they would understand the gravity of her actions and the pain she had caused. After a long day of testimony, I left the courtroom feeling exhausted. I could barely process everything I had seen and heard. I drove home with my parents, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. The trial continued for several more days, each moment feeling like an eternity. I listened as more witnesses shared their experiences. Each story brought a mixture of emotions. It was hard to hear about Marcus's struggles and pain, but I knew it was important for the truth to come out. As the trial neared its conclusion, I felt a sense of hope. The prosecution presented their closing arguments, emphasizing the need for justice. I could see the determination in their eyes, and it gave me strength. I wanted Marcus to have justice, to know that he was not alone in this fight. The jury deliberated, and the wait felt endless. Each minute felt like an hour as I sat in the courtroom, surrounded by anxious family members. Finally, the moment arrived. The jury returned with their verdict. I held my breath as the judge asked for their decision. When the verdict was read, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Zara was found guilty. I could hardly believe it. Justice had been served, and I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I knew it was not the end of our story, but it was a step in the right direction. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt lighter. The burden of the past few weeks was beginning to lift. I knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but I was determined to support Marcus as he continued to heal. Together, we would face whatever came next. After the trial, life began to shift back to some sense of normalcy. Marcus was recovering, although the scars from the attack ran deep. The physical wounds were healing, but the emotional impact lingered. I continued to visit him daily, providing support and encouragement. Each time I saw him smile, I felt a spark of hope. He was a fighter, and I admired his strength. One evening, as I sat by his bedside, he began to open up about the incident. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. Marcus described how he had never thought Zara would turn violent. They had their disagreements, but he always believed they could work through their problems. It was painful for him to reflect on the moment everything changed. He admitted he felt blindsided by her actions. This revelation deepened my understanding of how fragile relationships could be and how quickly love could turn to anger. As Marcus healed, we often talked about the future. He shared his dreams of starting a new chapter in his life. He wanted to focus on his career and rebuild his sense of self. I encouraged him, reminding him that he had the strength to overcome anything. Our bond grew stronger, and I felt grateful for the time we had together. Meanwhile, the community began to heal as well. The shock of the incident had rippled through Maplewood, but the love and support from neighbors helped to mend the wounds. People organized events to honor Marcus and to raise awareness about the impact of domestic violence. It was heartwarming to see how everyone came together, united in their desire to support him. Despite the support, the memories of that night haunted me. I found myself replaying every moment, wondering if there was something we could have done differently. I thought about the signs we might have missed. Did we ignore any red flags in Zara's behavior? Could we have intervened in a way that might have changed the outcome? These questions weighed heavily on my mind. As the weeks passed, I began to notice changes in Marcus. He was more reserved, often lost in thought. I understood that the trauma of the attack would take time to process. One day I encouraged him to speak with a counselor, someone who could help him navigate the complex emotions he was experiencing. I knew it was important for him to have a safe space to express himself without judgment. Marcus agreed and started attending therapy sessions. I accompanied him to the first few appointments for support. The counselor was kind and understanding, creating an environment where Marcus could feel comfortable sharing his feelings. It was reassuring to see him engaging in the process, slowly allowing himself to be vulnerable. Each session provided him with tools to cope and rebuild his self-esteem. As Marcus focused on his recovery, the legal proceedings against Zara continued. The trial had ended, but the fallout remained. I learned that she was sentenced to a significant amount of time in prison. I had mixed feelings about the outcome. On one hand, I believed that justice had been served. On the other, I felt a strange sense of loss for the person Zara had once been. She had become a shadow of herself, a cautionary tale of how love could morph into something destructive. Months went by, and the seasons changed. The summer heat gave way to the crispness of fall. Marcus and I often took walks around the neighborhood, enjoying the beauty of the changing leaves. These walks became a part of our routine, a time to reflect and share our thoughts. We talked about everything as progress, our family, and the dreams we had for the future. It was comforting to know we could be there for each other. During one of our walks, we passed by the park where the incident had occurred. I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. It was hard to believe that such a horrible event had taken place in a place we had once found joy. I could see that Marcus felt the same way. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. We stood in silence, allowing the memories to settle before continuing our walk. As Marcus healed, he began to focus on rebuilding his life. He started working on his career goals, taking small steps toward independence. He enrolled in courses that had always interested him, reigniting his passion for learning. I was proud of him and supportive of his journey. We often celebrated the small victories together, cheering each other on as we navigated our paths. One day, while Marcus was at a class, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was Officer James, the lead investigator on the case. He asked if I could meet him at the precinct. I immediately felt a knot in my stomach. I wondered if something had changed regarding Zara, or if there were new developments in the case. When I arrived at the precinct, Officer James greeted me with a serious expression. He led me into a small room where we could talk privately. He explained that they had received new evidence related to the night of the attack. It seemed that there were more layers to the story than we initially realized. I felt a mix of apprehension and curiosity as he detailed what they had discovered. The new evidence included security footage from a nearby store that captured parts of the incident. Officer James explained that they had been reviewing the footage for several weeks, looking for anything that might shed light on Zara's actions. I listened intently as he described the footage and the moments leading up to the attack. It seemed that Zara had been seen pacing back and forth outside Marcus's house before confronting him. As Officer James continued, he revealed that there had been a history of troubling behavior on Zara's part. She had been involved in incidents of jealousy and aggression that had not been reported before. This new information painted a different picture of her character, raising questions about her motives. I felt a mix of emotions as I processed this new information. I had thought I understood the situation, but now it seemed there were layers I had never considered. Officer James mentioned that they were looking into whether Zara had planned the attack or if it had been a spur-of-the-moment decision fueled by rage. As I left the precinct, I felt overwhelmed. I knew this information would impact Marcus as well. He had begun to heal, and I worried that learning more about Zara's actions would reopen old wounds. I decided to wait until he was ready to hear the news. When I saw Marcus later that evening, I could tell he was in a good mood. He had just finished his class and was excited to share what he had learned. I listened to him talk about his day, trying to gauge the right moment to bring up my conversation with Officer James. I wanted to protect him from any unnecessary pain, but I also knew he deserved to know the truth. After some time, I decided it was best to be honest. I explained the meeting with Officer James and shared the new details about Zara. I watched as Marcus's expression changed from joy to concern. He listened quietly, absorbing the information. I could see the wheels turning in his mind as he processed the news. He took a moment before responding, and I appreciated that he was taking the time to think. Finally, he spoke, expressing his frustration about the whole situation. It was clear that he was struggling with the new revelations. I assured him that no matter what had happened, he was not to blame for Zara's actions. We talked late into the night, discussing our feelings and fears. It was a heavy conversation, but I felt a sense of relief that we could communicate openly. I knew it was a step toward healing, and I was grateful for the bond we had strengthened through this experience. As we moved forward, I hoped we could leave the pain of the past behind us. It was a long road ahead, but I believed in our ability to face whatever challenges came our way. Together, we could navigate the complexities of healing, love, and moving forward from the shadows of the past. As the dust began to settle after the trial and sentencing of Zara, life in Maplewood started to return to a new normal. Marcus continued to heal physically, but the emotional scars from that night were still fresh. We focused on rebuilding our lives, but the memories of the attack lingered like shadows, sometimes creeping into our thoughts when we least expected them. Marcus had a lot of support, and he made it clear how much he appreciated everyone who stood by him during this time. The community organized gatherings to celebrate his recovery and raise awareness about the dangers of domestic violence. These events were powerful and allowed people to share their stories and experiences. It was healing for many, including Marcus and me, to realize we were not alone in our struggles. Despite the support, Marcus had moments when he would withdraw. He found it challenging to process everything that had happened. Some nights he would sit in silence, lost in his thoughts. I often stayed close, wanting to be a comforting presence without pushing him to talk. I understood that he needed time, and I wanted to respect his process. One afternoon, Marcus and I decided to go for a hike in the nearby woods. The sun was shining, and the fresh air felt revitalizing. Nature had a way of calming our minds and allowing us to escape from reality for a while. As we walked along the trail, surrounded by the beauty of the trees and the sound of birds, Marcus finally opened up about his feelings. He shared how he felt like a different person after the attack. It was difficult for him to reconcile the life he once had with the one he was living now. I listened carefully as he expressed his fears about the future. He worried that he would never feel safe again, that he would always be looking over his shoulder. I reassured him that these feelings were valid and that healing takes time. We talked about the importance of seeking help when needed and how therapy had already helped him begin to process some of the trauma. As we continued our hike, I encouraged him to find new hobbies or interests that could help him feel more connected to himself. Marcus had always enjoyed painting, so I suggested he pick it up again. It had been a long time since he had let his creativity flow, and I believed it could be a great outlet for him. He smiled at the idea and promised to give it a try. Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into painting. He created beautiful pieces that expressed his emotions and experiences. I could see a change in him. Each brushstroke seemed to lighten his heart a little more. He often invited me to his studio to see what he was working on. It brought me joy to witness him finding solace in art again. The change in Marcus was evident to everyone around him. His friends noticed the spark returning to his eyes, and his laughter began to fill the air again. It felt like a weight was being lifted, piece by piece. I knew that the journey to healing was far from over, but I was grateful to see progress. The night of his art show finally arrived. Friends, family, and members of the community gathered to support him. The gallery was filled with his paintings, each one telling a different part of his story. I stood by his side, proud of everything he had accomplished. Marcus spoke openly about his experiences and how art had helped him process his feelings. As the night progressed, people expressed their admiration for his work. They shared how his paintings resonated with their own experiences, how they found comfort in his vulnerability. It was a beautiful moment, witnessing the connection he created through his art. I could see the healing process in action, both for him and for those who viewed his work. After the event, we returned home, feeling accomplished and hopeful. Marcus had come so far, and I was grateful to have been part of his journey. We spent the evening reflecting on the night and discussing the future. We dreamed of the possibilities ahead and how we could continue to support one another in our individual journeys. While the memories of the attack would always be a part of us, we were learning to move forward. We understood that healing is not linear, but we were determined to embrace each moment and find joy in the little things. Our bond had deepened through this experience, and I knew we could face anything that came our way. The weeks turned into months, and the seasons continued to change. Marcus grew more confident in himself, finding strength in his creativity. He established a routine that included painting, therapy, and spending time with friends. He was learning to live again, to embrace life beyond the trauma. I watched as he started to open up to the idea of love again. It was a slow process, but I could see the glimmers of hope in his eyes. We talked about what it meant to trust again, how important it was to take things at his own pace. I supported him every step of the way, encouraging him to be gentle with himself. As the year came to a close, Marcus and I sat down to reflect on everything we had experienced. We spoke about the lessons we learned, the strength we found in ourselves and each other. We understood that the road ahead would have its challenges, but we were ready to face them together. The memories of that fateful night would never fade completely, but they no longer defined us. We had emerged from the darkness, ready to embrace the light. Together we were rebuilding our lives, one day at a time. As we stepped into a new year, we carried with us the hope of brighter days ahead and the promise of new beginnings. We learned to cherish the moments of laughter and joy, knowing that every step forward was a victory. The love that had sustained us through the hardest times continued to grow, shaping our futures in ways we had yet to fully understand. We were ready to face whatever came next, hand in hand, with hearts full of hope.